Hello, everyone. Welcome here today on our Workplace Wellness Forum. I have a wonderful guest with me. John Toomey is joining me from Australia. John, welcome.
Hey Joyce, how you going?
I am doing great. So, John, as we get started, I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about you. Who is John Toomey?
This is me here. I'm in Melbourne, in Australia. It's Saturday morning, very early here. Yeah, my background's in physical education. I've been working in the corporate wellness arena, well, on and off for 35 years. Interspersed with that, I worked in high performance roles in professional sport, mostly Australian football and some soccer. And yeah, these days I do an enormous amount of work in predominantly in heavy industry. I'd still do some white collar work, but working in mining and construction and oil and gas and those sorts of things. Um, yeah, and I'm just passionate about empowering people and inspiring people to take personal responsibility for their well-being. That's me.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. So you mentioned that you work in oil and gas and mining. How have those industries been impacted by COVID-19? Because we are talking now, and it is COVID-19 lockdown. How have these industries been impacted?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of them are in remote areas, so they really haven't been affected that much. Where they have been affected is in Australia, the way that the work happens. Most of these projects have fly in, fly out workforces, FIFO workforces.
Mhm,
So the workers might fly in, they might live in a camp, they'll work, say, 13 days, and they
mhm,
fly out and have 6 days at home.
mhm,
Where it became a problem is if those workers lived in a state other than where their work is, because we've got closed borders. So Western Australia, their borders have been closed for a few months now. Queensland borders closed, and they're the biggest sites for those sorts of projects, especially mining and oil and gas. And
mhm,
a lot of those workers in Western Australia, they live in Bali, because
mhm.
it's the pay packets in these industries are huge. People with no sort of great level of certifiable skill are still earning, between 150 and $200,000 a year to do these jobs. So they go and live in Bali.
Mhm.
So all of those sorts of things where their location is outside the state, that created a lot of difficulty for the companies. And I know there's a lot of tension between those big companies like Rio Tinto and BHP and the state governments. So yeah.
So the workers would only be exposed to the virus when they come back, when they fly home for 6 days. So if their borders are closed, are they then staying on site or what? What are some of the things? Because I know here in Canada, we've had, I think there's been one mine. They said that there was some contamination, and so always kind of when those things get into the camps, they can be very difficult. So,
Yeah, they've managed it very well. So Western Australia, which is a third of the landmass of this country, they haven't had an infection for months.
hmm, very
Yeah,
good.
so they shut their borders, they closed it down, and so you've got to remember, Perth is a city of maybe well, it's less than 2 million people. It's pretty spread out. There's always wind, so, and it's very sunny. So I think that they've been able to manage it pretty well and escape any sort of large scale infections.
Hmm.
Where it became a problem is that if those workers left the job and then they wanted to go back to another state, that made it difficult. So some of them had to find a way to stay in Western Australia, which meant disconnecting them from their families, which
Um,
created other
mhm.
factors. And
Or
I was
emotional
chatting,
and mental health, yeah, issues.
yeah, and I was chatting to one woman who does a lot of work in supporting FIFO workers, and her husband is a FIFO worker. He works for Shell, and so she ended up taking her child and going to Perth to visit him because
Mm,
they live in Queensland.
mhm,
And, she and her daughter had to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks
mhm.
before she could see her husband. So, yeah, I mean, people have found a way around it, but I think probably the issues that are affecting them more in those places are more mental health issues rather than virus issues.
Well, and that's the thing with the pandemic. It's not just we have to worry about us getting infected individually. It's also the social, the emotional aspect to it, the mental health aspect to it. We know the World Health Organization had said that by 2020, mental health, predominantly depression, would be the second highest cause of workplace disability, right after heart disease. But this was before anybody even contemplated the pandemic, the
Mm.
global health pandemic. And I remember teaching that in, to workplaces. And, by 2020, workplace mental health will be the highest cause of workplace disability. And here we are in 2020, and it's surreal because not only is that an issue, and we see the pandemic is maximizing or exacerbating that by creating these extraneous situations. People can't be with loved ones, people can't get a hug, people can't have that emotional connection. Even if you're with family, extended family, you have to be wearing a mask. So it does put an extra level of pressure on people, and we are already in a mental health crisis. Now, with the pandemic, we have this has become far bigger than anybody could anticipate or see. So I was kind of curious as to what are some of the things being done out in Australia to deal or to address with maybe in your work or in your community that you're aware of that's happening to deal with those social and interpersonal issues.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, Joyce, and I mean, I've been personally affected. A very close friend of mine's younger brother took his own life just 2 weeks ago.
Mm, so sad.
And, the devastation and the sadness in that
Mhm,
family is extraordinary. And I watch all of this happening, and I've done a lot of work in workplaces to help
mhm,
in the areas of resilience and handling mental health issues. And mental health is something I was very close to in a long-term relationship where my partner had really quite advanced obsessive compulsive disorder and deep anxiety, and so I got to know the mental health system very, very well.
mhm,
And I think there's so many perspectives here that are really worth exploring. And one of the things is that we know that when somebody's got heart disease or type 2 diabetes, we know when we're talking with them that there is a level of personal responsibility that they're perhaps not taking for their life. And they
mhm,
perhaps need to take more responsibility for exercise and
mhm,
diet and sleep and those sorts of things. Whereas we tend to look at mental health issues with a bit of a degree of mystery, and it's a little bit like it's a hallowed ground that you don't step into with anything. And one of the challenges is, how do we help people become more personally responsible
mhm,
with their mental health issues? And every human being has a mind.
mhm,
And every one of us, our mind can be a little crazy sometimes. It gets caught up in stuff. And we all know we've had times in our life where we make bad decisions. We can get a bit distressed or whatever.
mhm,
And oftentimes that's a culmination of our own thinking.
mhm,
And what I've learned over time is that mental health issues, they do start out with negative thinking that's not challenged.
mhm,
And people they can go down into a very dark place when they start to have repetitive thoughts. And of
mhm.
course, once you start believing a certain thing, you're easily going to keep finding evidence for it.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
know, in the look on another person's face, in a word that they say.
Mhm.
And so some people can take themselves to a very dark place. And I think that, what I've been trying to teach in the workplace is that we've got to get much better at challenging each other in the way we look at things, because every situation can be looked at from 20 different perspectives.
Mhm.
You know, as they say, is the cup half full or is the cup half empty? But there's a third perspective on that. It's the engineer's perspective, and that perspective is that that cup is twice as big as it needs to be. And that's a joke, but there's always multiple perspectives, and if you get stuck in one perspective, you're in danger of locking your mind up. And when we lock our minds up, we're in big trouble. Now, part of the I think it's part of the challenge of a wealthy society, because when you're in I try to imagine what it would have been like living in Australia 200 years ago, living on the land and trying to survive. It would have been everybody looking out for each other, supporting each other, helping each other.
Mhm.
Now, none of us actually need anybody for our survival.
Or at
Our
least we
phys-
think we don't.
well, you know what I mean, but our physical survival.
Mhm.
But you're right. It's what we've got to get better at is understanding that we need each other to keep our minds in a good place.
Yes, you're
you know,
very
and
correct. You're very correct because humans are social beings. And
yeah,
I'm a creationist, right? I know some people aren't, but as a creationist, I believe that we're created and we're created not to be alone. We're
yeah,
created to be with others.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's very
Well, I
important.
think that's and I feel that when we find a sense of purpose,
Mhm.
when we really find our purpose in our life,
Mhm.
it will have something to do with making life better for other people.
Yes, yes,
And a lot of people do jobs where they're not connected to that. So they have to battle boredom every day, just
hmm
to make a dollar. And then, of course, they can't save that money because they spend it entertaining themselves because they're so bored.
hmm
And and then there's others who take advantage of that. And I think that really where we're headed, and I'll stick my neck out here a little bit and say that one of the challenges in our society for all of us is that we've got to get more and more real about our level of integrity, the decisions that we make, and our level of self-interest, our
hmm
level of, where we feel superior, where we feel entitled, and then the things that we do from those places. And sometimes they're not cool. And we're all human beings. It's okay. It doesn't mean we're bad people, but uh,
We are, it's so true what you were saying, because one of the things I do, I get asked to teach a lot of diversity training, which is a big part of what I do at Interpersonal Wellness. We all look at how people interact with each other, and race and diversity is one of the elements we touch on. And when I go through my training, I do it differently. I said, humans are created equal, and the belief system we have that one group is superior or inferior to the other, it's a mindset. And
mhm,
if we don't shift away from that mindset leads us into thinking, well, yeah, I'm better than them, so I can do that to them. Well, they don't deserve that. And why would
mhm,
they have to? And it's so easy to go down that road where we get ourselves in these dark places where we are doing things that we wouldn't. And, with everything that's been happening, I know you see the news and you see what's happening in North America, and when you look at George Floyd, um, lying on the street crying for his mother, and the white police officer on his neck, and didn't have not even a tweak to think maybe maybe he's really in pain. Maybe this is, with people watching, it just, you ask, how does one become so dehumanized? And as we talk, he got bail. He's out on bail, right? And
mhm.
you think, how do we get there? And it's a mindset that gets us there. And when we start thinking certain thoughts, that's why we need community and we need diversity, because we have those different perspectives to question our beliefs, question our ideas, question our thoughts, and say, is that true? Is this perspective right? Is this stereotype right? And is it true in this moment? And it really keeps us in a safe place, I think, emotionally and interpersonally.
Well, yeah, I think you're really sort of stepping into some fascinating area there. And I think that, for all of us who are in workplace wellness, there's so much that we can do to get better and better.
Mhm.
15 years ago, I did an avatar course, and it's a course that was created by a gentleman named Harry Palmer, who's just an extraordinary, creator. He created a path for people that really does streamline a path to some level of higher awareness and awakening. And Harry starts with beliefs, and the problem is that we all have beliefs that are uninspected. They're just
Mhm.
sitting there and they dominate our consciousness, and they're
Mhm.
completely uninspected. And unless you have a technology and support to inspect your beliefs, they remain there, and
Mhm.
and it's so interesting because our beliefs create our experiences. And
Mhm.
people will tell you what they believe, but then if you look at what they're experiencing, you realize that they actually don't believe what they're telling you they believe. And it was so interesting that when all that George Floyd thing happened, and I looked at that officer, how he felt okay to do that. My response was, man, what beliefs have I got that would make me do something like that, or me be that righteous? And I think that's our biggest indicator.
Mhm.
When we start feeling righteous,
Mhm. Mhm.
we're becoming unsafe to be around,
Mhm.
because it means that other people are wrong, you know?
Exactly. Exactly.
And
I,
so,
absolutely.
and so,
I love this.
so supporting each other to explore our viewpoints and our beliefs,
Yes.
that's one of the greatest gifts that you can give another human being.
So
It's a great gift
important.
you can give yourself.
Yeah. Very, very important. And I know we could talk about this all day, but we are coming up to a time. I know you're going to be a speaker for us at the Global Workplace Wellness Summit. What can we
Yes.
expect to hear from you? What are you going to be focusing on, and what can our listeners expect to hear from you at the summit?
Well, yeah, I really want to help people across the world get much better at engaging men, you know. And, yesterday, it's so cool that we're talking today, because yesterday I actually got to do two stand up seminars to two groups of construction workers, all men, all wearing high vis vests. It was in a city called Geelong, which is an hour out of Melbourne. And, they've got less restrictions than we have. And it was so interesting. I was talking to a woman I know, and she said, "What was it like?" And I said, "What do you think it would have been like?" And she said, "Oh, they would have all been sitting there. There would have been know-it-alls, and they wouldn't want to have listened." Right? And I said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." I said, "In actual fact, they were quiet, they were engaged, and they were so connected and so interested,
Absolutely.
because I was talking to them about care." And you see, this time of year, as we're leading into the Christmas break, this is when accidents happen, because people start to put their attention on other things. Summer's coming.
Mhm.
And so it's so important that we help them get their attention. And my way of doing it is to remind them about care. And one of the things that we forget about men, especially the blue collar types of men, is that if, for example, a terrible storm hit your city tonight
Mhm.
and houses were smashed up and roofs were ripped off, they'd be the ones who are out there till 3 o'clock in the morning on their
Mhm.
knees, digging people out of rubble and
Yep.
making sure kids have got somewhere safe to sleep.
Yep.
So I really love those guys. So
Yes.
what I really want to work with on this summit is to how we can shift our perspective on working with men and really understand where they come from, because they do not want to be told what to do. I mean, none of us like being told what to do, right? And the reason they don't go to see GPs is because the GP is going to tell them what to do, because GPs haven't got time, So, but so what I want to do is sort of give another perspective on how we can talk with men and how we can educate them to sort of wake up an enthusiasm within them
Yes,
to take greater care, and it's so beautiful.
so
We have some
important. So important.
amazing, yeah, when those men, when their hearts open up, they'll sit there for 3 hours and they won't move.
Yes.
And I've got to say to you, Joyce, it's like the number of times I'll go to speak to those groups and some manager will come to me and apologize in advance and say, I'm really sorry you have to endure this. These guys are rude, they're disgusting, they don't listen to anybody. But they're somebody's husband, they're somebody's father, they're
Mhm,
somebody's son,
mhm.
and it takes less than a minute to have their full attention and their
Absolutely.
interest and to have an intimate
Absolutely.
conversation with them.
Yes.
It's that's how you view them.
It's the difference between talking to them, with them, and talking at them. And I think what they tend to shy
Mhm,
away from is the talking at them. And if you're talking with them,
mhm.
that's a different dialogue. So absolutely, that's exciting. I can't wait to hear more about that at the summit and November 10th to 13th. You're going to be speaking on November 13th. I'm so looking forward to having you at the Global Workplace Wellness Summit as a
And
speaker with us, John.
thank you so much for inviting me, because I can't wait to be part of it, Joyce. It's going to be wonderful.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you
All
there.
righty. You take
Okay.
care.
You
See
too.
you. Bye now.